Awesome. Good afternoon, party people. I'm Amy Perlman. I'm a urologist and men's health specialist at the University of Iowa Hospitals and Clinics. And I have such a special guest with us today on today's seminar. I have John Darcy, Chief of Innovation at the University of Iowa. John, say hello to the crew.
Hello, everybody. Happy to be here. Glad to be with you.
So, John, your current title is Chief of Innovation. What a cool title. What does that mean? Like, what do you do on a daily basis? And who do you talk to on the phone? Who are those people?
So my mission is to primarily help faculty members at the University of Iowa who have ideas, who want to solve problems.
Mm.
So in most cases, it turns out to be healthcare related because a large percentage of the research and intellectual property that's created at the University of Iowa comes out of the healthcare side. Um, and what that means is that there often are surgeons like yourself, or there are nurses or others that are seeing things that don't work as well as they might, and they envision a better way to do something. And so my mission is to facilitate that, to help them find the resources, to understand the process, to connect them with people that have experience in the space that can help them do that. So that then for the university, what that does is they publish research, they create a product, we help them make that product. Maybe they start a company, or maybe they license it to somebody who's already working in the space, but all of which enhances our reputation, brings more resources to the university, and it's problem solving. To me, my whole career has been about trying to solve problems and create new and better ways to do things.
Awesome. So you're a problem solver, a firefighter, and a professional matchmaker, bringing different people together from different disciplines who would have no other way of knowing who else can help them with their problems and their patients.
Exactly. Yeah, that matchmaker piece might be the thing I do the best.
But this is not what you did for most of your career. So let's take this back. I want to take this back to college. What did you study in college?
This is a STEM call, but I want to point out that I never took a business class, and I never took a science class in my career at Iowa.
Popular.
Whoops, sorry. And I think that's very important because I wanted to I studied literature, and I studied political science, and I had a degree at the time that was called the Bachelor of General Studies. They don't even offer it anymore. But it basically meant, and maybe this was innovative in itself, it meant that I could study whatever I wanted. And that's what I did. So I came out of Iowa without a degree that was directly applicable to anything, really. But I went into sales at that time in the medical device field, and I built my career that way. But I think the key for me, and the key for anybody on this call, is that sometimes kids get intimidated by the idea of innovation or entrepreneurship. And yet I really want to point out that it takes a wide variety of skill sets to ever solve a problem. So one person might have had a great idea, but it takes a wide variety of skill sets to take that idea and move it all the way to the other end to where it can really impact people. And so for anybody that is curious and has the fortitude and perseverance to try to pursue something, and a little bit of, you've got to have a bit of fearlessness as well if you're going to be an entrepreneur, because most of them fail. I was at 6 startups, 5 of them failed miserably. One of them was wildly successful. It's what's called a unicorn in Silicon Valley. But this was my whole career of 30 years of working in this field, that finally I got to a point where I was with an entity that really solved a major problem in healthcare.
Okay, and we'll get more to that unicorn a little bit later this afternoon. Okay, so you're in undergrad, you're studying general studies, whatever that technically means, but you're also competitively playing basketball, and you were on the 1980 Final Four team. What did being a competitive athlete, especially in college, teach you that would later help you through your career?
First and foremost, it taught me discipline. I played for a Hall of Fame coach, Lute Olson, who was here at the time that I was here. And he was so disciplined and precise. Our practices that went for 2 hours were uh, architected down to the minute. We went from one drill to the next. Everything was prompt, and it was very precise always, and that left an indelible impression upon me, and how I would kind of lead my life and look at how you work in life. But so that was a big deal. Another huge thing was teamwork. I played on a very highly functioning team, and that's enormously valuable. And it's very hard to get that kind of experience unless you've done it. So any business success I have had has revolved around a highly functioning team. And to get there, you have to have a certain amount of EQ and empathy, emotional intelligence and empathy, to try to figure out what pieces fit best together, how to develop trust. Trust is probably the biggest thing and the hardest thing to create, but it's so essential. And on a basketball team, for example, everybody has a very specific role. I was on the bench almost my whole career. I was a walk-on at Iowa, and I got a full ride, earned a full ride. But my role was very different than what you would think of a Luca Garza or somebody else that's on the floor all the time. But the role was equally important, and it was always stressed to me how important that role was. And so I felt very confident, and I knew that I was contributing to the team, just in a little less visible way.
Yeah. So let's think about some of the students who might be on the call who are in high school. And
Mhm.
I don't know during COVID times how many group projects there are, but I remember from high school, not that long ago, that there are a lot of group projects. And I didn't love group projects myself because I felt like I ended up doing all the work that a group should have participated in, right?
Okay, that's a
But
problem.
maybe
Yeah.
it's because, unlike a sports team, in those group projects, we don't identify the role of each person on the team. We
Mhm.
all feel like, I feel like I always had to be a leader, whereas sometimes maybe my role was to be a listener and a question asker and not always the leader.
Yeah.
So for people who are in high school now and they're, let's say, doing a group project, how does one develop trust within the group?
It's it's not the easiest thing to do. In fact, I think it's very difficult. I think that you have to be willing to allow yourself to be vulnerable, and with your teammates. And if you don't understand or don't know something, you need to not be afraid to tell them and let them know that. And I think once you open up a little bit, then others are able to open up as well. There's sort of something happens when someone allows themselves to be vulnerable,
Mhm.
that others say, "Oh, it's okay to be that way too. I don't have to keep this guard up." And um, that's fundamental to trust. You have to get to a place where you can have difficult conversations with people. If somebody's not performing, like you're saying, you always have to lead. You've got to be able to have a way to approach them and talk to them and get them to raise their game a little bit without offending them or making them defensive. And it's a challenging proposition.
Yeah. I think what I've learned throughout the years is to ask rather than make a statement in those scenarios. And an example I can think of is like, I wonder what we could do with this project if we all contributed to writing of this paper. Or
Yeah.
I wonder what other ideas we could come up with if we each sent out an email to the group with something that we're brainstorming. So the I wonder is not going to offend anyone.
That's a great, I'm glad you said that. I was thinking about that because that's what I do all the time in groups. I say, what if we thought about doing it this way? Or have you thought about that? And then it opens up a dialogue, and people, will contribute without me saying, I think we should do this. Let's do it this way. So I'm asking for input first, which is more easy for everybody to accept and to then participate. So I completely agree.
Yeah. And then, not to say that I disagree with what you said at the beginning of your answer with it's very complex to develop trust, because I agree with that. But
Mhm.
at its fundamental, I think it's also very simple. And building trust, I think, is doing what you say you're going to do, even if it's as simple as, do you want to meet at 5 p.m. on Tuesday to discuss the project, and not flaking on that person and being there at 5 p.m. to discuss the project. And
Yeah.
we're all building our reputations, and we start building our reputations from elementary school, is
Right.
building that trust. So when we're in high school and we're in a same group project with someone we went to elementary school with, all of our experience with that person are going to either build or break down trust in that scenario. So for the high school students and the students on the call, you're building your brand right now. You're building your brand for your high school groups, for your college groups, for your future. And it all begins with being a genuine person who shows up when you say you're going to show up.
Yeah. I think too that, one thing that I've learned over the 40 years is that people are wired very differently.
Mm.
Not everyone is going to think about a problem or approach a problem the same way that you might approach a
Mhm.
problem. And so keeping that in mind is really helpful. Some people are, it took me a long time in my career to realize that I'm sort of process driven, in that when someone comes with a new idea, it takes me a while to process it. So if Amy, if you came to me and say, hey, I have this fantastic idea, I may not know what to do with that. I may need 24 hours to think through it. And so, one of the things for kids to think about is to not be afraid to say, this is really interesting. Let me give that some thought, and I'll
Mhm.
come back to you tomorrow at 9 a.m. or something. Because some of us are just that way. I
Mhm.
used to try to push myself into answering immediately, and then I'd go home and sleep on it and think, no, I don't think we should do it that way. And then people would get very confused because they thought I was flip flopping. So finally, I realized, and I got enough confidence and strength to say, okay, I can't give you an answer today. I'm going to give you an answer tomorrow. But you've got to understand how your own mind works versus your teammates, and that's so it's I think it's challenging. I really do. But there's hope.
There is hope. There is hope. So let's go back to that teammate analogy. When
Mhm.
you were on that team of executive members for the last company with which you were involved, who were the different team members? Like, what were their different major roles, and what was your role on that successful team?
So I was with a startup that came out of Stanford University, out of their biodesign program, and I was the third person in the company. So there were three of us initially, and there was the founder, who was a physician, who had the idea. And then he went out and he brought me in because I had a deep experience in the space, in the cardiology space, and had worked in areas very close to where his project was. And then we brought in a business CEO. So I was an executive vice president of sales and marketing. Over the course of that 10 years that I spent there, I went from 3 people to 600 people, and uh, zero in revenue to 100 million in revenue. And now the company is worth, 4 years after that point, the company is worth about $7 billion. So it has been an enormous success. I came from a sales and marketing background. I didn't have the STEM background I talked about, science, math. So I was kind of the people relationship guy and the business development guy. And I'm sort of a strategic thinker, but I didn't have the pedigree of everybody sitting around the table. So everybody else had advanced degrees. Many of them were PhDs or physicians. So it was a little intimidating for me. And yet I had a very deep experience in this space, which was why I was valuable to the team.
Hmm. What excites you about your current role as chief innovation officer? Because you have this high level of seeing everything sort of going on in this area. So, despite the pandemic and everything that goes on with that, what
Mhm.
excites you?
Well, I get excited about solving problems, particularly in healthcare. Every day there's somebody that comes up with an idea that it's a better way of doing something, and the intricacies of figuring out how to actually take that idea and go through the FDA process, or figure out how to get reimbursed by Medicare and the government, and trying to make a user interface that is so easy that people will adopt. There's an enormous amount of intricacies in trying solve a problem. And that's incredibly gratifying to be able to help a researcher or a faculty member that has an idea and to move it forward in whatever way. So, that's kind of what I've done my entire career, taking novel concepts and try to bring them into the mainstream to improve patient care. So it's enormously satisfying.
Yeah. And as we close out, I just want to go back to this theme that we talked about throughout today's session, which was everyone plays a role in the team and we all have a different skill set to bring to the table. And I think in my arena as a physician, I care for patients, but part of that is being an educator and being a mentor. But I can do whatever I want in my own space. No one's going to know about it unless I get it out on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook, and using Facebook now to educate folks. So when I think of what could be the role of a high school student, even with working with someone like you, Chief of Innovation, and someone like me who's a physician, I'm thinking like, how can we educate high school students on common health issues? And in that sort of arena, I'm not relevant, but the student is relevant because the student looks like everyone else in terms of age in that space of a high school. Or like if you're working on a project, I'm working on a project, is like having a student that can teach us how to get it out on Instagram and how to do that effectively. So I am so excited about that type of skill set that high school students can offer to our teams. Are there other roles that you can think of despite COVID where people might be helpful?
I'm sure there are. It's not obvious. Social media, of course, is one for sure. I think for kids, have confidence that and ask a lot of questions, and looking for opportunities to do internships or calling people up. Everyone likes to talk to students. That's one thing I've learned since I got to the university. Everyone who's coming to help here, it's mainly because they want to talk to students. And that could extend down to high school just as easily. I'm always surprised at how, when I was in college, although I had this general degree, I had an internship at Amana Refrigeration. I went to Washington, D.C. and did an internship for a congressman. I started writing articles for the Des Moines Register. This is the first one I ever did. So I was very curious about a lot of different things. And that's sort of, if you look back 10 years back or 15 years back, you will see, things that seem very random in real time, there's real patterns to what you create. So being very mindful of that and looking for opportunities and asking people to give you an opportunity, never be afraid to do that. There's just not enough kids that are out there doing internships and trying to find opportunities. So just knock on doors and keep knocking.
Yeah. And you had mentioned that you were studying literature, and that's what I think. If you as a student can learn how to write well and communicate well, you will be so successful. The art of knowing how to write well is a lost art. And I don't care what type of degree some person has, if they don't know how to write well or communicate with their audience, they're not going to get their message across. And I learned how to write well in my 8th grade English class. My teacher was a real stickler and marked everything on my paper. And I was like, what am I doing wrong? But that's where I learned how to write well. And you write on a regular basis for the Des Moines Register. Yeah. And awesome. Any other lasting thoughts for the group, John?
Well, pursue your passions. And don't take no for an answer. Perseverance is so important in this world, in this life. So try to discover what your passions are, and that takes time. And when you do, follow them and don't give up.
Awesome. I love it. Well, that concludes today's STEMinar with John Darcy, Chief of Innovation, 1980 Final Four basketball player champion. So to find out more about upcoming STEMinar events, go ahead and you can search the uihealthcare.org/STEM for upcoming events. We appreciate your time today. John, you want to add something?
I wanted to add something.
Yes.
The Jacobson Institute in the Papa John Entrepreneurial Center, Tippy Business College, has a competition for students There's money involved. You have to apply by November 20th. That's the deadline. But they do a ton of STEM work as well. And there could be an opportunity for some of you if you have an idea you'd like to pursue.
Yeah, so I think it's this beautiful thing that happens when you bring together science, technology, engineering, math, business, all of this stuff that creates these wonderful, productive teams. Have an awesome day, folks.
Thank you, Amy.